Sentiment analysis is one of those concepts that fall under the natural language processing umbrella. The idea is that we can use a computer to analyze text and get a general feel for the emotional tone behind a body of text. So you don't have to read it yourself. Organizations use sentiment analysis to identify and categorize opinions about products, services, or just general ideas, usually when mining bulk user review information. Let's look at how Dundas BI can utilize sentiment analysis capabilities with Python to automatically generate user reviews. Then we'll see how it does with some manual inspection. Wasting no time, let's get to this quickly. Also, speaking of doing something quickly, did you ever notice that the biggest problem with being punctual is that no one's there to appreciate it? I'm Jeff, and this is Off the Charts with Jeff. In this video, I'm going to show you three things. I'm going to show you sentiment analysis, what it does, and explain the scoring system. Then I'm going to show you how to apply this analysis in Dundas BI. And finally, show you a dashboard that I created where we can see how well this analysis does. Now, a little bit of a heads up on this one. This video is a little bit more technical than most of the ones I do, but even if you don't know how to code, you can always take the samples that I do and repurpose them to your own use. It is fairly easy to modify what I've done to get it working for yourself. So to start, here's a quick tester dashboard that I created, which will allow us to enter some text, and this text will be passed over to the sentiment analysis module in Python, and we'll receive some information. And you can see how well the application rates it. With the statement, Dundas BI is a great product, and you need to use it to solve your reporting problems, we'll see how the natural language engine looks at this, and you'll see that it returns two metrics. The first is Polarity, which ranges from -1 to 1, negative being negative, 0 being neutral, 1 being positive, and sentiment going from 0 to 1. And this is weighing the people's personal opinion of the text. You can see that from my input, we do have a rather positive polarity, but the statement is also fairly subjective. Now let's see what happens if we pass in a negative review from Game of Thrones Season 8. I can't say I really disagree with this one. And you can see that the metrics have reflected accordingly. So how do we do this? Well, to start, we're going to build a data cube. And for those of you who might not be familiar with what a data cube is, it's basically where all things data are handled within Dundas BI. The data cube requires an input of some kind, which in our case is going to be a Python data generator. This input will give us the ability to write a script, which will be fed into Python, which will in turn give us the values that you saw before. Now you may recall that on the dashboard there was a text box where the user could enter information. To allow for this capability, we first need to create a parameter which can be used by our script. As for the test script itself, there's not a lot going on. You can see that I'm going to start by importing some libraries, in my case pandas and TextBlob. Just be aware that TextBlob also uses the NLTK natural language toolkit, which you'd also have to install. So it would really be a matter of getting your administrator to go over to your server, run the pip command, and the install is pretty simple. If you've ever installed any Python modules before, it's exactly the same. Next, the code is going to get the text from the user input using the parameter that we created. From here, we build the output structure that we want to use, call the sentiment analysis on our input text, add data that we want to output, and return it. Really simple. And you can see why I'm saying earlier that I do believe that somebody who isn't familiar with coding could probably get this working, especially given a sample as a starting point. It's not too bad. So this is a great test, but let's try applying this to some real data. Now here is a cute product that we found on Amazon, and I wanted to take a bunch of reviews for it, the star rating, the titles, etc. And I've already gone ahead and stored them in a database. Now taking this exact concept, we're going to shove these into the sentiment analysis engine and see how people feel about these reviews. And we can compare it to the star rating because that'll give us sort of a gold standard behind what people actually thought they were writing. So a 5-star review should have very positive text, etc. So how do we do this? Well, it's pretty much exactly the same as what I just showed you, except we're going to use real data. So instead of starting with the Python data generator, we're going to have the input be a table from my database that stores the reviews. And instead of creating that parameter for the user input text, we're just going to have to add placeholders to the Python script so that we can bring in the data that we want to use within it, and then of course output it later. Just like before, we're going to import our libraries, create the structure of what we want to output, and then loop through all these reviews to provide our analysis. And finally, we would build our output. And that's it. As you can see, it's already giving us data by going over to the data preview screen. Now, I did go ahead and build a dashboard to display some of this information. Specifically, I thought it would be interesting to see how people's titles and their text review compare when we look at the polarity that the sentiment engine is outputting. So I'd expect that these values would be fairly lockstep. If you have a negative title, you're probably writing a negative review. But look at this one. Clearly, the title is highly negative, but the content of the review is slightly positive. That's strange. So let's see what's going on. Now, if you look at the review, disappointing is the title. I think that certainly deserves the negative polarity that's being assigned. But let's look at the text. There's a lot of positive content in here in the introduction, which is probably skewing the algorithm to be slightly positive. I love the elephant when it arrived isn't exactly a negative statement. Moving on. She loved the elephant. So you can see that what's kind of happening here. The title has definitely been negative, but all this positive content in the review that ends up being negative is pushing it towards the other side, which I think is reasonable. All in all, this does seem to do a pretty good job, and we can see pretty clearly with a quick skim of the star versus ratings how well it's done. You can also see that from the top here we have a distribution, and most of our reviews are 4 and 5 star. So you can see that that is certainly reflected on the polarities that are being given here. Now this is pretty cool, and it can certainly help you plow through a lot of text-based information if you want to do it quickly and start quantifying it. Now if you like this idea and the concept behind it, I'd recommend taking a look at a video that we've already done on predictive analytics. It's the same concept, but there's some ideas here that will certainly help you, and they're along the same vein of sentiment analysis. Check it out, and thanks for watching.